Dom you.
Dom you.
Dom.
Dom you.
Domination University. Katie, welcome to Domination University.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So I'm excited to have you here. You're a local in the neighborhood. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Because you got your hands on a good amount of things, just like anyone who moves to Los Angeles.
Yeah. I mean, I initially moved here as an actor, so I've done some acting. I mostly do a lot of writing. I've written a screenplay. Right now I'm working on a novel. And I'm also doing a podcast called EH Radio. That's kind of a performing arts narrative podcast. And I play all the characters and write it. And creatively, I guess that's about it.
That's all.
Yeah, no big deal.
Awesome. Well, it's so nice to have you here. There's probably so many different topics that you could talk about, but we tried to narrow it down. So I'm going to ask you, gender, why does it even fucking matter?
I mean, that is like kind of my biggest thing and why I kind of got into the topic of gender roles and gender identity outside the binary norm. Because I'm more of a person who, I don't know, and maybe I could ask you, like, when you were younger watching movies, did you solely identify with female characters, or did you find yourself also identifying with male characters?
Oh, yeah, surely.
Yeah, because, like, when I was little, I had a real struggle with, like, I didn't have any, like, female role models, really. Like, I always was more identifying with male characters. And, not that I really... through teenage years, I was like, well, maybe I'm gay, but I'm not. And I'm definitely, not, I'm comfortable with my body. I'm not transgender. So I started, researching online, basically different gender identities and the gender the gender spectrum and other identities outside, just male and female.
Right on. Yeah, it's such an interesting thing that we can actually study it as much as we can now, because for so long there's just been the binarism type of viewpoint. But I think for me personally, I can relate because I'm trying to think what the term is. I think it's gender neutrality. That's what it is. I think for me, I can relate to gender neutrality because I feel like to identify as a woman versus to identify as a man is just so limited of who we actually are as human beings. And I don't think really anything in nature has that much of a polarity. When you think about polarity in nature, you can easily think about yin and yang or yin and yang in terms of the interdependent forces of opposites. But it's not a white-black, yin-yang, strictly kind of thing. They're completely entangled and kind of creating and processing and mutating within each other all the time. And if you look back into history, you'll see so many different examples from cultures all across the world, from South America to even Russia and Siberia, South Pacific, Native Americans who had less limited viewpoints of what gender actually is.
That's a good point when you mentioned, different cultures around the world. Even, even the three big religions like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they all, while maybe not, laying out a complete spectrum of different gender identities, they all do touch on intersex identity, because so many of their religious laws, there are different laws for men and women. So all three have kind of a rule for, the other. So like even in, the more traditional religions, like there is a space for more than just male or female. But we're so obsessed with, and even the name, like traditional gender role, like tradition to what, really? Because it's not actually an historical tradition, because the further you go back, the more egalitarian communities became, the less importance there is on gender roles. And I don't know, we've just gotten away from that, I guess, especially because of religion.
Yeah, that seems to be the main culprit here is religion. So let's try to kind of dissect some of this stuff. First off, there's some different terminology that we can understand just to differentiate for anyone who hasn't studied this academically. So there's sex versus gender, and I've seen references to gender is what's in your brain, and sex is what's in between your legs, essentially your orientation,
Right.
Versus how you see yourself and identify and want to express yourself. That's your gender. And it's interesting how difficult it has been for anyone who's deviated from the normal binary heterosexual. Other than just the normative stuff, you can say like, oh, well, this is it, and Adam and Eve and whatever bullshit. But the reality is that there's intersex individuals, and there's actually tons of different variations. And so, the Protestant, normative, conservative viewpoint of if you're a male, then you have an XY chromosome versus if you're a female, you have an XX. In reality, there's so many different variations from, a human being born with 4 X chromosomes to a human being born with 3 X chromosomes and a Y, or an XXY, XYY. There's so many different variations that occur in nature. And so the argument completely goes away if you say that there's only 2 systems, the XXXY, when in reality, sorry, science proves you wrong. There's a lot of variation.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. Like, I get so tired of that conservative argument that, biologically there's only 2, and like really there's not. There's, thousands of, and especially because like so much of therapy is based on a binary idea of sex and gender. Like science and psychology doesn't really allow much. Like they're just starting to introduce, transgender or non-binary gender therapy.
Gender therapy, as in basically to help someone who's
just
in a non-conformity, or what's
what did you say? That was a good gender neutrality.
Gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria or transsexualism. Transsexualism is the experience that your gender identity is inconsistent with your biologically assigned sex. And then gender dysphoria is basically the distress, when you're in distress about it, because not everybody is going to be. Like I said, I feel myself as being more of a gender neutral person,
right?
And that's because I'm not attached to being a woman. I love being a woman, and there's definitely masculine sides that think, hey, this is great, but I'm just spiritually, I don't give a fuck. So that's kind of where I'm at. But and I think that's kind of the point, is why do we give a fuck? If someone is depressed, if someone is feeling, that friction and that they're missing out in life, how could we possibly take that away?
That's a good, I was trying to think of what kind of advice to give people to more like fully realize and explore their own identities. And so much of it is, especially for women, don't buy into the patriarchy, basically. Like you don't have to be, there is no set rules like that define a woman that you have to meet. Like you don't have to have a husband to be a good woman or have children to be a good woman. But our society places a lot of emphasis on that being your entire female identity, the domestic fulfillment. And I think it's hard for women to not break out of it, but just accept that they don't have to do that and not give a fuck. Like it's really easy for me. I've never really, and my biggest thing with identity is like I don't want my appearance or my mannerisms or my actions to be perceived as feminine or masculine. Like I don't care, and so I would hope that other people don't either. And I can't control other people, but I can at least control my perspective on it. And I think if more people will do that, like that is a good way to break out of it. Just stop caring that people misidentify you like that. Like as long as you know your identity, then like you should be okay.
Yeah. Our personal experience of life through gender can be so drastically different from one person to the next. and we place so much emphasis on it, and it's in the limited scope that we do. I think how we can benefit, I think more so with relationships, with being more exploratory, is just recognizing just how much that we can gain from our environment and in relationships. Like I think, for example, taking some standard examples of guys are supposed to be macho, guys are supposed to do this and that for you, and then girls are supposed to cook and clean and
Right.
do all this and that. Well, what if, like, in my experience, well, my personal life, my dad's a contractor, he can build anything, so I've always been a tomboy. I've always been able to, like, usually out mechanic, out build my boyfriends, because and it's like, well, hey, if you knew what my dad was like, what's that one guy, the shop guy, the Tim Taylor.
Oh, see, that is like, my dad was a contractor, a carpenter, electrician. So like, I know how to do all of that. Like, I can work on my car, and some guys find that emasculating. Like, they don't want a girl who can, they do, like, and I just, and then you're in the position where you just have to like hang back and watch your boyfriend do something wrong because, he won't listen to you.
Oh man, yeah, that's exactly how it is, and it's funny. My boyfriend actually now, his dad was basically retired now, but he was this amazing salesperson, and he's also just amazing in the kitchen. Italian, of course, yes, of course. So just, and the amount of love that the Italian culture can give in the kitchen, at the dinner table, and just these beautiful, like, family experiences is by nature somewhat more feminine, because it's so nurturing, and
That's
it's
true.
so like just the givingness and the desire to strengthen someone with food. You know,
What's the like domesticity? Like, it's domestic, like homemaking, really, in the sense of,
yeah, it's so elevating to the house to be domestic, and that's saying as someone who's actually better with a hammer and nails and like a screwdriver than I am in the kitchen. But the domestic life can just be such a beautiful, king and queendom. And it's wonderful if you can express that. So that's one of the ways I always say that my boyfriend's love language is food. That's his love language, because that just that's just one of the ways that he shows affection and shows care, and wants you to be strengthened and
Right.
and fed and not go hungry. And me, I can build anything. I built him 2 custom tables over there. I have this antique basically entertainment center, and part of the compromise domestically was that I was going to custom make 2 tables to the side to serve for the purpose of housing some things like his PlayStation.
Nice.
It has to be able to sit on the table on all 4 sides, perfectly supported. It cannot hang off. I did not know that about PlayStations. It cannot hang off the table at all. It has to be fully supported at all times. I'm not a gamer.
Yeah,
so
I was not
maybe
aware of that. I didn't.
Okay,
No, this is some enlightening info.
So I custom made this table to be as ergonomic as possible, and also house the PlayStation from a utilitarian standpoint. So but again, you're breaking away from the gender norms and the friction that we have within ourselves of like, oh, I need to, and I tell my boyfriend, I'm like, look who your dad is, and look who my dad is. If we switched, we'd have the same
Exactly.
skills.
Yeah.
And that being a product of our environment, but we can kind of go back and forth between, the physical aspect, the nurture, the social developed part of our existence, of how we express our lives, as well as the internal part too, is
Right.
such again, interdependent.
It really is. And that's a good point about, like, I'm glad you brought up family and, your childhood and upbringing. Like, I read something not too long ago that said, infants start observing their parents and identifying gender roles at 15 months of
Wow.
age. So, if they see the mom doing all of the housework, then and the dad doing nothing, they're going to think that's what male and females do. So it is really important to, instill in your children a more egalitarian, like gender neutral environment, if that's, how you want them to grow up, which I think would be nice, if all parents would do that.
So why wouldn't they? Do you think that innately, so many people have a fear that society will look down, oh, you're not conforming, you're not doing things the same? Like, do you think that there's this basic discomfort that humans have in the unknown and the different?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it is fear of what other people will think, and some of it is so natural for women, like the emotional labor and overcompensating for men's emotional maturity, because it's a masculine trait to not talk about your feelings or cry or emote or anything, and for the woman to overcompensate for that. Yeah, so if women will stop overcompensating for men's emotional maturity, and I don't know why that is so automatic for women to do. Like, it is so easy for us to play into the supportive emotional role, but we don't always have to do that. I feel like that adds to a lot of, I don't know, like gender stress for women, is trying to be this supportive role and take on too much for men. And I don't really know how to combat that. I mean, you can't make men be more emotionally mature.
I do have some devil's advocate.
Ooh,
thing to
yes,
say.
let's hear.
Yes. Okay. So I was thinking about this earlier. I think, not every woman does that, but a lot of women do. And
For sure.
I'm very, very emotional when it comes, surprisingly, when I'm not using tools. I'm very, very emotional. But I was thinking about how, it's okay for me to do that from a sociological standpoint. I can be emotional and I can be caring, whether I'm overcompensating, but men cannot from that same sociological standpoint. And I think one of the issues that we have in gender dynamics is that men aren't awarded the same type of self-care. They're not awarded the same type of discipline when it comes to nurturing themselves. If you were to think of a group of girls or women that have a support group where they can share their feelings and talk about the difficulties that they're going through, which is, in a way, that's what this podcast is trying to do. But think about guys having a support group for guys where they can talk about their feelings. Would that? Yeah, I mean, think about how socially, like, we're guys. We don't have to talk about our feelings. We don't have to self-care. And you don't have to, guys, if you don't want to self-care, that's fine. I'm not saying that you should, but I'm just saying that if you want to, if you feel like that you could, benefit from that, because I feel like for every single person, that's such an important part of resetting from the daily stresses that we're facing. There's so much of life that is unnatural that I think it requires a good amount of self-care and more just time out, you know what I mean? Time out for you. And so I think that could be, not to say that guys are emotionally less mature than women or anything like that, is that men aren't awarded the luxury of getting to know their feelings and taking time out. Sorry, that.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely agree with that. Like that, like women are taught, all of these magazines that we start reading as teenagers, like they're literally just self-care. Like it's get facials, do meditation, do this, spend time working on yourself. And if you look at, men's magazines for teens, like it's, fast cars, video games, hot girls, like there's nothing about your feelings. And that's a good point. Like I think like men need a place where they can talk to each other. Women do have each other. We do go, like we band together, and if one of us has a problem, we all solve it. And men don't have that at all. And I don't really know how to build that for them. And I mean, I know, like you said, like they don't have to do self-care if they don't want to, but I think a lot of them would want to, but they just don't know how to go about doing that. Like, how do you approach your guy friend and be like, hey, can I cry to you for a minute? Like, I don't really see a lot of guys doing that.
Guys, you need a spa trip.
You do.
Trust me.
Yes.
Every guy that I know goes to the spa, loves it. Guys don't go to the spa and like, oh, that was terrible. I'd never do that again. It's okay to spend your money there. And nail salon. Nail salon is hands down one of the most relaxing places you could go to in Los Angeles, that is. Oh man, I just walk in, I start calming down.
So,
Ooh. Yes.
and that's a good point. Like, there's no place, men don't like have a space like that. Like, women do have this sort of like salon spa culture where we do go and we talk about our feelings and we gripe and we vent and we relax. And, you know, men don't have that.
They talk about sports. That's what they do.
That's not
how they
relaxing.
nurture themselves. So I was in San Diego about a week ago, and I often stay at my uncle's house and just talk to him, philosophize about, you know, the nature of personal reality and the universe, and just, you know, just light subjects here and there. But he's a yogi, and he's just been a total devotee to his spiritual practice, very rooted in Eastern Indian philosophies and stuff like that. But he had the he had the fortune of being able to kind of come of age in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, which was such an amazing time of enlightenment and different adventures of consciousness and philosophical exploration. But he talked about this support group that he was a part of. This may have been like, I don't know, 80s or 90s, but it was basically people of his generation that are in their late 60s now. So they were coming of age in the 60s, the flower child people and whatnot. So it was a support group for adults, and it was put on by a psychologist, and it was mostly oriented, it was targeted for men in the same way that Domination University is more so our target audience is women. That's kind of the angle that we're coming from. But there would be women who would show up at this group too, so it wasn't closed off, and that's what we're trying to do here as well. But it was really interesting because how often do you hear about that, where adult men get to come together and to really kind of expand the realms of the nature of reality and the experience that we have based on the world that we basically construct with our minds.
Never. I mean, that's like something.
It's time to bring that back.
Yeah, it is. Definitely. Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, he loved it. It seemed like it was pretty beneficial. I'm going to grab some more wine here.
Oh, yeah.
My neck. Yes. Gender. So, you want some more wine? Did you have some?
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
I could take a little more.
Yes. Pouring it up.
Oh, thank you.
Pouring the bread. Yes. Cheers. Salud.
Oh, salute.
Domination. So there's some other things that we could probably talk about. We talked a little bit about biology and intersex. History. We could probably talk about this a little bit more. I thought this was interesting with, did I write it down? The two-spirit. So the Navajo believed in two genders, So the Navajo believed in multiple genders and that you could be both a male and a female. And they, I think that was called the Birdachi or the two-spirit, or that was at least the name for one of the Native American two-spirit, multi-genders at the same time philosophies. And I think what's really interesting about that notion is that, you know, in being two spirits, you know, it really doesn't limit you to being one or the other. And I think one of the biggest issues that I have about this subject is that the idea of gender is such a grounding thing. And so it comes to me from a spiritual standpoint as being very analysis paralysis. That's what I think. And it just seems so, like, so are you just flesh and bones? Because if you're just flesh and bones, then you can say that you're just one, one
Right.
sex or the other, whether it's one gender or another. But what's interesting is that we're pretty much the exact same in terms of our chromosomes until the 6th week in utero. And so it's from the get
Right.
go, we're pretty much the same, flesh and blood. Another matter, stardust, that basically gets metamorphosized, and comes through the earth as this magical human being through the portal of a gaping vagina, which is fucking magic. Magic.
The best portal.
Power. But otherwise we're all just stardust, from the get-go, just like, racially, just because you see particular genes expressing themselves in one particular way that makes, you have gorgeous red hair and me have blonde hair, it's just an expression of a gene that's like, a swipe of a paintbrush. And it's, as an artist, I love colors. I love
Right.
just painting it out, and certain, it's just a color. How can you like one and not the other, or limit one to the other? Because you know what I mean. There's like, in especially coming, I'm really jumping off into the deep end now, but in terms of like painting, the artistry with color, there's no black. There's no black color. It's the absence of the light versus all the light. You know what I mean? There's
Right.
just this fragment of our senses based on, what our eyesight thinks it sees through the, prism of our minds. It's not exactly what it really is.
Totally.
It's not.
Well, and you mentioned we're basically the exact same until 6 weeks of age in utero. Like, archaeologically, well, I guess
Anthropologically?
yeah.
That's a doozy.
Anthropologically.
Ooh, warm up.
Yeah, right. So yeah, in anthropology, when they are determining the gender of bones they find, if they can't determine a child's gender at all. If it is below, 12, 13 years of age, they have no idea. Yeah. Yeah. And even, with adults, if they have a pelvis, it's a little easier because, they'll be able to tell if a baby can pass through the pelvic bone or not. Then, well, if it can, then it's probably a woman. But every other bone is rated on a scale from, definitely male to maybe male, probably male, neutral, and then all the way to female. And like, if they have, say, an entire skeleton, they assess all the bones individually, and then if they have more female-ish bones, then they'll be a female. If they have more male-ish bones, they'll be a male. So it's not really. And I like that you brought up like in utero, we are kind of a blank canvas. Like, your gender identity is kind of really up to you. Like, we are all the same. I mean, not really, like, not biologically, sexually maybe, but like, as far as gender identity and expression, like, we are all the same until we decide, 12 years of age, puberty, like, you're old enough to start really thinking about how you want to express yourself, like who you want to be to the rest of the world. I don't know, like, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, like, if you were to tell me that in another life I was a guy, I would be like, oh, okay, yeah, totally.
Yeah, I would, same.
I'm sure I was
could
a
believe
guy,
that.
at least in one other life. And I have no idea. Was I a female in more past lives than male? And it doesn't really matter because it's just such a fixated, grounded, narrow viewpoint of, what I think probably as a spirit that I've wanted to experience.
Well, I hate to be I don't want to be one of those people who is like, men are terrible and they suck and they don't know how to do anything, and how do we live with them?
Oh, man.
Because, like, they need They need the feminism as much as we do.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, I think also women need the masculine as much as
Absolutely.
they do too.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that a little
Okay.
bit. I actually was reading this article earlier that was pretty impressive when it talks about it. Basically breaks down the genders from the standpoint of yin and yang, which is more simplistic when you. So I'm actually going to try to pull this up.
Okay.
But some of just some basic yin and yang descriptions. Okay, so if you don't know, it's actually yang, not yang.
Not yang, y'all.
Yeah, it's really not how you say it in ancient Chinese or any Chinese language. It's just, if you prefer to say yang, you can say yang. No judgment. But it's actually yang. I've had this discussion with multiple Asian American acquaintances, and I challenge them every time. And then they come back and they tell me I was right once they talk to their parents. So anyway, so yang. So yin is when you look at a yin yang, this ancient Chinese symbol that has been portrayed through so many different philosophies, religions, spiritual paths, like Tao Te Ching and Taoism and Confucianism and among others. I mean, I'm not the best person to be talking about that, but the black part of the symbol is the yin and the white is the yang. That does not mean good and evil. So black is the yin, and yin is the feminine, the receptive, the cooling. And I'm actually going to read from this website called embodyingman.com. And the article is Men Aren't Yang, Women Aren't Yin. So I'm going to paraphrase some of it, but I thought it was a very worthy article to read. So I'm going to try to grab the parts that are basic to yin and yang, just so you have a better understanding. And Chinese medicine rocks. See your local acupuncturist.
Absolutely.
I love that shit.
I cannot endorse that enough.
Yes. Oh man, I don't know what I would do without it. But so this is just some simplistic descriptions. But yin is water. It's contraction. It's inside. It's downwards. It's cold. It's believe the colors are blue and green and purple. Yang being red and orange and yellow. It's warming. Remember, yin is cooling. So yang is fire, it's expansion, it's the outside, it's upwards, it's heat, it's subtle. So yin is so yang is assertive and yin is receptive. Yang heats, yin expands, and they're continually basically creating together. Think about having an inspiring idea and then actually doing it. So it's very limited perception to think about just the anatomical examples in men and women of yin and yang, receiving and getting it. But some, think about just as simplistic, because we can philosophize on this. It's definitely very abstract, as it should be, because how do you actually describe forces of nature? So think about being assertive. So I usually consider that not my masculine side. I feel like being masculine today.
Yeah.
I think it'll help me in my life. So think about being assertive. Assertive being, just something you got to do sometimes. You got to assert yourself. Cut through the crap. Don't waste time. And then yin being more receptive. And so whereas yang is going to just cut through and tell it like it is, yin is going to listen, and yin is going to transmute a situation. And unfortunately, so much and through the ages, we've not fully appreciated the strength of the feminine, the soft strength, the ability to listen and transmute. And there are so many situations in your life where that is the only way to actually accomplish something. That's just the truth about it. You can't always go force versus force. That's how the yang is. The masculine is action by action, and the yin is more action by inaction. So you're going to constantly see the need, whether or not, you're a male and you're in a situation with someone in your life where the best thing for you to do is to be warm and receptive and cool, cool and transmute. Or for a woman where you need to be assertive and bold and there's no one there to help you, you're either going to be taken advantage of in a particular situation, or or you're gonna fucking lay it down and be like, yeah, this is how it is, whether you're defining your boundaries or you're negotiating a deal. But those things are so important for all of us. You can't limit yourself to one or the other to be to actually fully excel in your life.
Absolutely agree. Like, there needs to be a fluidity to those two forces, to the assertive and receptive. Like, you need to be adaptable, because there are times, like, we will all have to do that, and if you try to do the same thing for every situation, that will not work. I mean, you will not, and not just on like a practical, like, that will make you unhappy, really. I think if you try to do that, the results will not be fulfilling to you. Like, you do need to, because adapting is part of being a human, really. Like, adapting to social situations, giving and receiving. I mean, you can't really expect to receive unless you do give some.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, so it's, there, prime evidence of why we should really question the limitations of, gender, socializing per gender. And unfortunately, if you look back in history, there's been so many different situations where, like, women, for example, I think it was in the 90s, Barbie, they made like a Barbie doll that said, it said, math is hard, and it was like a talking Barbie doll, or it was a talking doll. Maybe it wasn't Barbie.
Oh no, I think I remember that.
It was some type of toy, and I think when I look at one of my grandmother's generations, women were not. I think she was probably that classic 50s housewife, but when she killed that role, she did a great job. But women were not encouraged to be smart. They were not encouraged. My other grandmother broke all those rules. She's from the country, so she didn't have as much of a force of the machine that is society to try to mold her. She just naturally went to what interested her and made her feel empowered. But when you look at just like a couple generations ago, how detrimental it was to be kind of put in a box if you were one gender. Especially, like, look at all the, there's a box for men as well as there was a box for women in terms of what was socially acceptable for you to express, the gifts that you thought that you could best give.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, men, I don't want to focus too much on like the male limitations of,
let it out, Katie.
Gender, but like,
let it out.
Like, that's the big problem, is that like men can't emote. Like, that's, if I had to pick one problem with like gender roles, it's that, men don't have the support group. Men aren't able to emote. They aren't able to shoulder their emotional responsibility, and not through like because their testosterone makes them crazy and think only about sex or anything like that, just because they don't have the tools, they don't have the network to emotionally process and deal with things that women do. And I think, if we taught men how to do that, a lot of issues with women would naturally fix themselves, I think. I mean, it would still take work for women, but I do think like that would kind of lessen the societal strain on women to have to feel like we have to be, well, because, like, for men, their success benchmarks are really different from women's. Like, to a guy, having a hot girlfriend is, like a success check mark, which is so weird to
And a girl having a guy with a fat wallet.
Yes,
is a success
exactly,
check mark.
exactly. So, and that becomes important to men, like I have to get the good job with the money so I can get the hot girl. And, like that's such a superficial life goal to have.
Like a framework of success.
Yeah.
So what then, just to be somewhat egalitarian, what then can women do differently? What do you think the hardest thing that men? We have a guy in the other room. Maybe we should ask him.
Yeah.
But what do you think women could do better at, or what do you think women are limited by in terms of their social programming that probably drive men crazy?
Oh.
Since your pet peeve is men's inability to emote, which is very difficult. I back you up with that.
Gosh, well, I'm trying to think of things that like men have tried to force on me. Like guys
Cooking
always,
and cleaning?
yeah. Well, that definitely. I mean,
Fuck that. I do not. Well, no, I cook now. Yeah, he's changed me.
and I mean, I like cooking, but I'm not. Food is a big thing. Like guys think women are really into food. I'm not. I'm waiting for us to like have pills that we can take because
Really?
like yeah, totally.
Oh,
Well,
damn.
because it's like such a waste of time to me, which is so nice
no
to like
way.
meet someone like your boyfriend like who does love food, and I'm like, oh, food is kind of
such a good
nice. Like
cook.
food's kind of nice to hang out with because
Oh,
otherwise, I'm like, oh, I have to prepare something. Like I am just not.
It's the ritual of it.
Yeah.
It's the ritual of just expressing love and care and nutrition and like, let me feed you. Let me give your body some
Let me just
love.
nourish
Let me
you.
give your body fuel.
Keep you alive one more day.
Fuel
Yeah.
you up. Yeah, it's just so sweet. So yeah, it's definitely the ritual. So cleaning. I do not clean. I have a housekeeper.
Yeah.
It's worth it. Figure it out.
Like work it into your budget,
Just do it. I don't care. It's worth the money. Find a way. There's different, price spectrums. I mean, you may not. The lady who cleans for me is a friend of mine, and she's a damn good cleaner. And there is a difference when that is your profession. You just kick ass at that shit. You do it all the time. You just nail that out. Like it's like. I mean, obviously it's work, but it's different. Like me trying to clean my own house, I'm just like wandering around, and eventually I'll put on some Billie Holiday and drink some wine, maybe get high, and then maybe it'll start to get clean. But it's just not something I have the emotional availability to do. But so it's the more that we can reduce some of this shit, the better. So there's this phenomena called gender doing, where, in relationships, regardless of a particular situation, you might be more prone to do what your gender has been programmed to think that they're supposed to be doing, even if it's not necessarily an equal part of the interchange of the relationship. And so for me, the reason I refuse to clean is because I have so much going on.
Yeah.
It's no more my goal. Now, that would be different now if I was raising kids or if I was working part-time or if I was doing less, to support the partnership, then I would be more, oriented to be open to it. But that's not the case. And I think it's important for people to think about partnership being more of an equal thing. And that's, I think, what works in opposites, no matter what your sexual orientation is or how you identify as, from a gender standpoint. Partnership is about having that balance and having the ability to support each other. And so when you break down the basic expressions of yin and yang energy and how they can balance and help each other, then it's well above the, limited, framework of gender roles, and then it works. It's amazing.
That's a good point. And it is sort of a mentality thing, like not looking at it as, a feminine energy and a masculine energy coming together and working for your partnership. More of a, who needs to give and who needs to receive, like constantly changing, like supporting each other and being there for each other, regardless of the masculinity or femininity of whichever role you're playing at the moment. Like, partnership, you have to just be the other. No matter whatever the other person is, you need to counter that. Like, that's kind of what you do. Like, that's, what do you call it? Like homeostasis. Like, that's how you keep things in a balance.
Chris Rock calls that playing tambourine.
Yes.
Did you see
yes,
his new
I
special?
saw that. Yes.
Oh, so good.
I loved that analogy.
God,
like,
so
sometimes,
smart.
you just need to play tambourine.
He's so brilliant. I loved it. Yeah, exactly. And suddenly it seems so simple.
Yeah, it really,
Stop
and it is.
thinking so much. Stop trying to analyze everything and put it in a box. You can't do it.
Absolutely. And like, don't, like, who are we trying to impress meeting society's expectations? Like, no one's, there's not like anyone keeping track with like, oh, you're being a good feminine person, you're being a good masculine person. Like, there's no reason to, I don't know, like, play that game. Like, just be individuals, be a good partner, support your partner, whatever that means at the given time. And I don't know, like, gender fluidity and like fluidity in general is what we need to more focus on instead of like being one role.
Yeah, exactly. It's that giving and receiving, keeping your your karma, your checks and balances with the universe, and just from the standpoint of just having that flow. If things are a life imbalance to me, especially from a standpoint of action and energy and receiving the fruits of my labor and my time, is that give and that let go. And so you can find that in your life in very small, simple situations where you get to give. So just give. You can give. You're being called upon. Give, let go, assert, create, move the energy, as well as, receive, pull in, learn, hibernate sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Very important.
Meditate. Yeah, those things can be huge, and they're completely, just absolutely crucial to being balanced in your personal experience as well as your relationship. So I don't know if I'm going to put this in there, but I'm going to say, going back to that article on the embodiedman.com, it's definitely worth your while to look a little bit more. Maybe I can just put this up here, this link. But what they talk about is so many different areas of your life where the average person is going to be practicing a more masculine, more yin type of like action and behavior. For example, like a woman raising kids. Once a woman has kids, she basically exercises more of the masculine, assertive type of energy based on being the boss of that. And what woman do you know is not the boss when it comes down to being a mother?
Absolutely.
Suddenly, you know what I mean? It's not just about that receptive yin nurture. It's about bam.
No, it is being assertive
right
to the
here.
max. Yeah.
Yes. This is and then other ways, I don't know, it has some very interesting points. I'm not going to just regurgitate everything right here out of respect. You can check this out yourself. But yeah, it's better for anyone. What else do you want to say, Katie, about genders and
I feel like,
do you have any other grievances?
I don't think so. Not really. I mean,
it's a new world that we're living in. Like it feels like at any point in time, there's going to be like another breakthrough in terms of basically a more elevated look at the reality of the complexity of our existence than there's actually been. I feel like we're starting to be able to wrap our heads around those things in a manner that allows us to lift up from where we've come from, because it's been problematic. There's been a lot of persecution to anyone who was non-conformative. So it's promising, and I hope that it continues to go in a more liberated and accepting and loving manner, because that's what it comes down to at the end, is that you always have to choose respect and love and acceptance before you accept what you think another person should be doing. Because if you're more concerned with someone else's gender or someone else's nonconformity or someone else's personal expression of who they think they are or who they want to be or how they're feeling on any particular day, that says something about you.
Yeah.
It doesn't say they're not the freak. You're the freak. Okay? Like, seriously, that is what, it's a sickness of the mind.
It is. Yeah.
If you think that you really need to try to persuade someone else and to fit into the box of what you think it means to be a particular human being, like, fuck off. No, like, seriously, just get over it. Mind your own business.
Basically, well, and like, if anyone comes at you with that nonsense, remember, like, they have no place to speak on your actions and your personality and how you present yourself. Like, I feel like a lot of people do I've been guilty of that. Like, people make judgments about the way I express my identity, and like, I let it hurt my feelings and get to me. But like, you don't have to do that. Just remember, that's their problem, not yours.
Exactly. We're way more complicated than the binary system has tried to place us. It's just, no, sorry.
Absolutely. And like, touching on your like hope for the future, like, I did read something that said, gender dysphoria is like on the rise in the youth. Like, lots of younger folks are dealing with that, and which sounds kind of like a bad thing, but I think that means like the tide is about to turn. Like, if that many people are unhappy with the current gender system, then it will change soon. Like, it will open up some more.
Yeah, for sure. I was reading on that too. It's definitely refreshing.
It is, right?
So you youngsters, keep pushing against the grain.
Yeah, do it.
You got more
here.
Momentum than I do.
Right.
Too many responsibilities.
And time. Yeah, like.
It's the time. Rebel. Yeah. Don't just listen to the box.
Absolutely.
Life is way more complicated. The human experience is way more complicated than anyone can try to basically mold you into thinking, no, this is life. This is life. No. Be beyond that. Be beyond the body. Be beyond the mere flesh. That's what every religion, basically tries to do, is to elevate and to realize an existence that is above the body anyway.
That's something that's interesting about like where gender identity is going. Like, I was trying to be really careful about which terms I used, because it's so like, it's such a sensitive topic. But I think we're at a place where like the ideas behind gender identity have sort of surpassed the language for it. Like, the language will catch up. Like, we will eventually work out terminology for all of this, but like, we're at a place where it's not there yet. We're all still kind of figuring out how to like define gender as something other than male and female, and we're all using different terms, and like non-binary, gender queer, gender non-conforming,
cisgender.
Yeah, cisgender. Like, there's transgender, transsexual,
Gender
like
neutral.
Yeah.
That's me. I'm neither. You can't put me in a
all
box.
of them. No, yeah.
I'm a spirit having a magical human experience.
What is the other one? Agender. I heard that one today. I was like, I kind of like that. Like, just
analysis paralysis. We're just spirits having human experiences.
That's all. I just want to be a like a
make it worth something more than just like consuming the fuck out of the earth and
Yeah.
fucking each other and figuring out what fits where. So I'm not sure if this is even an area that we should really even try to explore here, because I haven't prepared for this really at all. But seeing that we're trying to basically break apart the constructs of gender from a social standpoint, I wonder if we should touch at all on the effects of biology and hormones and stuff, because I've even heard accounts when I took human sexuality. There was a guest speaker who was transsexual, and he described what it was like to, get on testosterone. He described the economic boost, or I'm sorry, the social boost. He's just like, I just raised my social status in transitioning into being a man, and so it was interesting about that. And he talked about how his partner described him changing the way he expressed himself once he was on testosterone and living fully as a man, and that he just started being the type of person who would answer a question with 2 words or 2 sentences.
That is very interesting. And I feel, I've never like undergone a hormone treatment or anything, but I had a friend who was similar, who transitioned to a man and started taking the testosterone. And I would ask him, do you feel like different? And he would be like, yeah, I like literally don't care if my partner is satisfied sexually. Like, I have had a complete change in mentality in terms of how I like communicate with my partner. And I was like, really? Like, and how much of that, I don't know, like how much is biological and how much of it is, like you said, like a change in social status. Like, my friend went from being, like a white lesbian to like a white man who had a wife who, could, like, that's top of the world right there.
What else is there?
Exactly. So like, how much of that is just the psychological social boost that now you can do, like, now you're the man, like now you are the alpha as opposed to the beta feminine. But I don't know, like
hormones are crazy though.
They are.
Because different times when I was on birth control, I had one particular birth control pill that I was on, and it seriously made me feel fucking crazy. And I only took it for like a month or 2. It was high. I have a really funny story about trying to buy birth control in Costa Rica.
Oh my God.
Not speaking any Spanish at all. I don't know if I want to go into that here, but I ended up getting this really high dose.
Oh no.
Yeah. So anyway, it kind of, oh man, it kind of fucked my shit up. But I ended up coming back to the States and taking a similar, or I don't know what it was. I think maybe someone was trying something. Someone switched my birth control pill from the low dose to like a regular dose. And I felt it was the type of birth control that changes your hormonal dose each week to try to emulate the changes of hormones in a woman's cycle. So, for example, a woman will have spikes in estrogen when she's fertile, and then when she's getting close to her menstrual cycle, she'll have spikes in progesterone. So, trying to mimic that. And I just remember it feeling like it was a roller coaster. And I had taken birth control, the low dose kind, for several years, and just out of nowhere to take that was just like, whoa.
Really?
It was crazy. And being someone who tries to practice mindfulness and meditates and tries to constantly differentiate myself between my mind and my emotions,
Right.
It felt like I was basically swimming in the deep end of the pool.
Really?
And it was really exhausting. It's like, man, I don't know how much longer I can keep my head above my emotions.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quite profound. And I was like, never again. This is a nightmare.
Wow.
And so it's kind of funny to think just how powerful our hormones are. And ultimately that does affect our existence. But I feel like your hormones can even change different types of your life. If you're with your mindset too. You know how the brain will release certain neurotransmitters and dopamine and with serotonin and stuff, different stages of your life. If you're looking at someone, a lover, and you're in love and you're feeling all the oxytocin and stuff like that, or you have the things are going great for you, so you're releasing other neurotransmitters. I mean, hormones and neurotransmitters do shape our reality quite substantially.
That's true.
And for some people more than others, and that's why it's important to break away from that too.
It is. Well, like you said, like the mindfulness, like that really has to be a constant. I mean, no matter what, really.
Exactly. You're not your mind, just like you're not what's between your legs.
Yes.
You're more than that.
We all are.
Yes. We are. The scope of who we are is way beyond just the limited attempt to categorize. I don't know what it. Like, what is
That's
it?
how I feel. I like.
What is it?
We're so much more than our sex and gender. It doesn't even matter. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So fuck it. In the end,
Absolutely.
Gender is just a label, and it's a minimal attempt to try to ground and classify the scope of your being. And it's so important to have balance in our lives. And whether or not you're a man or a woman, or you identify as somewhere in between, or both, or beyond, or none, you can benefit from the expression of yin and yang in your life, in your relationships, and to definitely try to balance and support the people in your relationships, in your network, and in your life. And ultimately, we all lift each other up.
Totally. I agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming over. Katie, you're welcome anytime.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Oh, of course. Yes.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to put some links where people can find more of you.
Oh, thank you so much.
And your awesome energy. So thank you again, and cheers, and domination.
Domination, you.